please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Saudi Aramco is reportedly planning to set up a construction company with local and international partners, and it's all aimed at building non-oil infrastructure in the kingdom. It's part of Saudi Arabia's efforts to broaden its economy beyond energy. This coming as we've seen a major transformation in the oil markets. By the way, since we mentioned oil, let's check on oil prices, since we haven't done that today. 52 and a penny and 57 and change. Sri joins us again from the Singapore International Energy Week conference. Sri, we were talking about COP23 and climate change in the previous section of the in the previous session.
Yeah, we were, and it was a very interesting conversation with Christiana Figueres, who was one of the principal architects of the Paris deal, and roll on COP23 and the discussions in Bonn in early November as we get closer to that 2020 timeframe now, and this push towards carbon neutrality. What's changed is that there are big question marks over whether the US is in or out, engaged or disengaged. And the message from Christiana Figueres was very interesting because despite the White House's perceived lack of interest in terms of pursuing the Paris Accord, she has found that a lot of American businesses do want to comply and do want to take emissions down. This is what she had to say.
The White House has communicated that they are actually repealing many of the previous administration legislations and regulations to support the decarbonization. The interesting thing there is, however, that even with those repeals, even with that, we have today 9 states, 300 cities, 1,200 corporations that have come out to say we're still in. We're still in Paris. We understand that decarbonization is good for our economy. It's good for the health of our people. It's good for job creation. It's good for energy security. Therefore, we're continuing no matter what the White House says.
So what's interesting, Bernie, is that this transition is real. It is happening. This move towards carbon neutrality is taking place. And fossil fuels, let's face it, are not going to disappear overnight. We're in this transition period. Gas and LNG is going to play a very, very important part as a bridge from this current position right now towards carbon neutrality. So that's a big point to make there, especially with regard to the Asian Pacific context. The other point is that carbon neutrality is happening, as I said, and prices are coming down on the cost curve in terms of renewable energy. Within the Indian context, if we're talking about new build solar versus new build coal, 2.9 cents per kilowatt hour versus 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So there is a cost rationale taking place here. Right, let's get back to the US and their position and bring in John McCarrick. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Transformation at the US Department of State. John, pleasure to see you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start first of all with COP23, those climate change negotiations in Bonn happening in November. There will be a US representation there. Can you tell us more about what the message will be?
I think the message is continued engagement. We're not walking away from the issue of climate change. We want to be part of the conversation going forward. We're sending Undersecretary Tom Shannon, the Undersecretary for Political Affairs. The delegation will include a number of people from state, energy, and the White House. And so we're still fully engaged on this issue, just in a different structure.
Can you give us any clarity at all in terms of what the US wants, in terms of, if we talk about rewriting the rule book here for climate change renegotiations, what does the US want out of a renegotiated Paris Accord?
I think they want a deal that's good for America, and I think they want a deal that does not require an overburdening of the American taxpayer and the American energy consumer. And so I find that what we're going to do is look and try and strike the best deal that we can for America.
All right. In the meantime, as I said, this transition is happening. Gas is increasingly the fuel of choice, the transition fuel of choice.
Might I also point out,
please,
through natural gas, we are already below the numbers, the targeted numbers for the United States under the Paris Accords. And so the idea that we're not still trying to get the numbers down, we are getting the numbers down, just using different methods.
And is there more US LNG coming onto the international markets?
Absolutely. That is a major focus of this administration in terms of both creating the framework in the United States where we can get as many gas terminals up and running as possible. That is why I'm here in Asia to talk to businesses and governments about developments that we can make to increase methods where there are different types of contracts coming into play, shorter term contracts, spot contracts. So we're over here discussing the potential to develop those markets and the potential to develop the infrastructure to support the additional importation of LNG.
And if we talk about those export terminals in the US, as we've talked about before, it is a tough sell from an environmental point of view. So can you bring us up to speed with how many have been certified, how many you hope to be certified and up and running and operational within the next 2 to 3 years? Where do we stand there?
Goodness, I don't have that data with me right now, but we are moving with all due speed to appropriately permit these facilities. We are not trying to truncate the process. We're trying to prevent any sort of issues that would come up that would slow the process. We are conducting full environmental reviews. When I talk to these LNG companies, they have no problem with doing a full environmental review. It's just that sometimes an issue will come up and there will be a delay of 6 months or 12 months.
Right.
And that can't happen. We need to work much harder to make sure that we are doing the best we can to maximize the capacity to export LNG.
It has been a tough sell, though, hasn't it? Let's talk about energy security, especially in this part of the world,
yes,
and energy sanctions specifically as they have been applied to North Korea. What's
yes,
been the net effect of that, John? And are there more sanctions to come on North Korea's energy infrastructure?
Well, the sanctions are incredibly rigid right now. The key with the sanctions is the implementation. And we have been actively working with our allies and countries in the region to make sure that the North Koreans aren't able to ship any coal. They've been trying to sneak some shipments around and do it in a way that's not appropriate. The ships turning off their transponders, the like. And so we've been carefully following this and notifying the shipping interests and the countries where the coal arrives, and making sure that they can't benefit from coal under the sanctions regime.
Final question, John. When you consider the oil market fundamentals right now and this great rebalancing act, it's very much a case of shakes versus shale. Do you think US shale producers are increasingly being seen as the new swing producers, usurping Saudi, usurping the Gulf producers, and is OPEC therefore an increasingly irrelevant force in the global oil markets?
Irrelevant, I would say their influence is absolutely decreased, and part of that is due to our production. The reason we like producing the fuel is it's good for our economy, but it's also good for the markets. We believe in markets, and we believe in pricing and not setting arbitrary prices by OPEC. And OPEC historically is used to doing so, and they're finding it more and more difficult because our production is up and our exports are up.
When do you hope to achieve energy independence?
As soon as possible.
2022, is that an aspirational time frame?
Current aspects for oil independence is 2022.
Very good, sir. We'll leave it there. John, it's a pleasure.
Sure.
Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you very much.
John McCarrick there from the State Department.
All right, thanks, Sri. Up next, love it or hate it, the rise in blockchain technologies open up opportunities, and companies here in Hong Kong want to get in on the bandwagon. We're talking cryptocurrencies as we launch this week's Global Opportunities Hong Kong series next.